Daniel Cole floated in the endless darkness of space, and he knew with absolute certainty that he was going to die here, among the cold stars and the broken pieces of his ship. The Orion's Grace had been his home for 18 months, and now it was nothing but twisted metal and shattered dreams spinning slowly through the void. His oxygen tank showed 0, and his suit had a tear along the left arm that let the freezing vacuum seep into his bones like a hungry predator. He could feel his body shutting down, his thoughts becoming slow and heavy like stones sinking into deep water. He was 32 years old, and this was how it would end. Not on Earth surrounded by family, not in a hospital bed after a long life, but alone in the space between worlds, where no one would ever find his body. Danny thought about his sister Lisa, back home in Ohio, probably sitting on her porch right now, drinking coffee and watching her kids play in the yard. She would wait for his messages that would never come, and eventually someone from the company would knock on her door with rehearsed words of sympathy and a check that could never replace her brother. He thought about his mother, who had passed 3 years ago, and he wondered if he would see her again wherever people went after death. The thought brought him a strange comfort, as his vision began to fade around the edges, like an old photograph left too long in the sun. The mining accident had happened so fast that Danny still could not piece together exactly what went wrong. One moment they were extracting minerals from an asteroid, and the next moment alarms were screaming and the hull was tearing itself apart, like paper in a hurricane. He remembered grabbing for a safety line and missing by inches. He remembered the horrified face of his crewmate Rodriguez as the vacuum pulled Danny through a breach in the wall and out into the merciless emptiness of space. Rodriguez was probably dead too, along with the other 14 souls aboard the Orion's Grace. Danny hoped they had gone quickly, that they had not suffered the way he was suffering now, with the cold creeping through his veins and his lungs burning for air that would not come. He closed his eyes and let go of the desperate hope that had kept him struggling for the past several hours. There was no rescue coming, because no one knew where he was, and even if they did, he would be long dead before any ship could reach him. Peace settled over him like a warm blanket, and he found himself grateful that the end was not as terrible as he had always feared. He simply felt tired, so incredibly tired, and the darkness behind his eyelids was soft and welcoming. His last thought before consciousness left him was a simple one. I tried my best, and that has to be enough. Time ceased to have meaning for Daniel Cole. He drifted in a void that was neither warm nor cold, neither light nor dark. Perhaps this was death, or perhaps it was something else entirely, but he was too far gone to wonder about such things. And then impossibly, sensation returned. He felt warmth first, spreading across his chest and face like morning sunlight streaming through a window. Then he felt pressure, the solid reality of something beneath his back, holding him up against what might have been gravity. Sounds came next, muffled and strange, like voices heard underwater. Someone was speaking in a language he did not recognize, words that rose and fell in musical patterns that tickled something deep in his brain. And beneath those alien words, he heard something else, something that needed no translation. Someone was crying. The tears fell onto his face, and they were surprisingly warm. Whoever wept above him was weeping with genuine grief, the kind of sorrow that came from losing something precious. Danny forced his eyes open, and what he saw made him question whether he had truly woken up or simply entered a new kind of dream. A face hovered above him, but it was not a human face. The skin was the soft purple color of lavender flowers, and the eyes were large and iridescent, shifting between blue and silver as the light caught them. Delicate ridges ran along the forehead and down the sides of the neck, and the ears were pointed and swept back like wings. The alien woman, for somehow Danny knew she was female, was weeping openly. Tears streamed down her lavender cheeks and dripped onto his chest, and her shoulders shook with the force of her grief. She believed he was dead. Danny tried to speak, but his throat was raw and dry, and all that came out was a weak croak that sounded more like a dying animal than a human voice. But it was enough. The alien woman froze, her iridescent eyes going wide with shock. She stared down at him as if he had just performed a miracle, as if he had risen from death itself to meet her gaze. "You are alive," she whispered in heavily accented but understandable English, and her voice trembled with disbelief. "That is not possible. You were dead. I checked your vital signs myself. Your heart had stopped. Your brain showed no activity. You were dead for 2 full cycles." Danny did not know what a cycle was, but he understood the important part. He had been dead, clinically and completely dead, and somehow he had come back. He tried to sit up, but his body refused to cooperate. Every muscle ached like he had been beaten with hammers, and his head pounded with a ferocious headache that made thinking difficult. The alien woman placed gentle hands on his shoulders and pushed him back down onto the bed, and Danny realized he was lying on some kind of medical table in a room filled with strange equipment and soft blue lights. "Do not move," she said, and her voice was steadier now, though her eyes still glistened with tears. "You have been through a terrible trauma, and your body needs time to recover. I am Velara, and you are aboard the Catherine research vessel, Luminous Dawn. We found you floating in the debris field of your destroyed ship." Danny stared up at her, his mind struggling to process everything she was telling him. Aliens were real. He had been rescued by aliens, and apparently he had died and come back to life. "How?" he managed to croak out, the single word scraping painfully against his dry throat. Velara shook her head slowly, and wonder replaced the grief in her iridescent eyes. "I do not know," she admitted. "I have studied hundreds of species across the known galaxy, but I have never seen anything like this. You were exposed to the vacuum of space for nearly 2 standard cycles. Your body froze solid. By every measure of biology that I understand, you should be permanently dead." She paused and wiped the tears from her cheeks with the back of her slender hand. "But here you are, breathing and aware and asking questions. Your species is new to us, human. Tell me, are all of your kind this difficult to kill?" Danny would have laughed if his chest did not hurt so badly. Instead, he just smiled weakly up at the alien woman who had cried over his body. "We try our best," he whispered. And in that moment, lying in an alien medical bay light years from Earth, Daniel Cole realized that his life had not ended in the cold darkness of space. It had only just begun. The days that followed were filled with wonder and confusion for Daniel Cole as he recovered aboard the Luminous Dawn. Every waking moment brought new discoveries about the Kethrian and their place in a galaxy far stranger than anything he had imagined. Velara became his constant companion, visiting his medical quarters several times each day to check on his recovery and to ask endless questions about humanity. She was a xenobiologist by profession, dedicated to studying alien life forms, and Danny was the first human she had ever encountered. "Tell me about your homeworld," she would say, her iridescent eyes bright with curiosity. "Tell me about Earth." And Danny would tell her, painting pictures with words of blue oceans and green forests, of mountains that touched the sky, and deserts that stretched to the horizon. He told her about cities filled with millions of people, and small towns where everyone knew each other's names. But as he spoke, he noticed something strange in Velara's reactions. She did not look impressed by the beauty of Earth. She looked horrified. "Your planet has storms that destroy entire cities," she said one evening, her voice filled with disbelief. "You have creatures that can kill with a single bite. You have temperatures that swing from freezing to burning within the span of months. And you survive in gravity that is nearly twice what we Kethrian can tolerate." Danny had never thought of Earth as a dangerous place, but through Valara's eyes, he began to see his homeworld differently. It was not a paradise. It was a death trap that had forged humanity into something tough and resilient. The Kethrian evolved on a world called Velthar, Valara explained. Our planet is gentle. The temperature never varies more than a few degrees. We have no large predators. Our gravity is low enough that we developed hollow bones to better move through our dense atmosphere. Compared to humans, we are fragile. She held up her hand, and Danny noticed for the first time how delicate her fingers were, how thin her wrist seemed. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, but she was also breakable in a way that humans were not. You could crush my hand without trying, Valara said softly. You could survive injuries that would kill any Kethrian instantly. Your species terrifies me, Daniel Cole, and yet it also gives me hope. Hope for what? Danny asked. Valara's expression grew serious, and she looked away as if gathering her courage to speak. The Kethrian are scholars and healers, she said finally. We have never known war, we have never needed weapons. For thousands of years, we have traveled the stars in peace, seeking knowledge and sharing it freely with any species we encountered. She paused, and when she looked back at Danny, there was fear in her iridescent eyes. But now something has changed. A species called the Vroxul has entered our sector of space, and they are not interested in knowledge or peace. They are conquerors who take what they want and destroy anything that stands in their way. Danny felt his stomach tighten at her words. He had survived the death of his ship, only to wake up in the middle of an interstellar conflict. The Vroxul see us as prey, Valara continued. We have no warriors, no soldiers, no one trained in the art of violence. When they come for our colony worlds, we can only flee or surrender. Hundreds of thousands of my people have already been killed or enslaved. What about other species? Danny asked. Are there others in the galaxy who could help you fight back? Valara shook her head sadly. The galaxy is vast, and help is far away. By the time any friendly species could reach us, the Vroxul will have taken everything. We are alone, Daniel, and we do not know how to save ourselves. Danny lay in silence for a long moment, processing everything she had told him. The Kethrian had saved his life, had pulled him from the void, and brought him back from death itself. They had shown him nothing but kindness and compassion. And now they were facing extinction at the hands of ruthless conquerors. Over the following weeks, Danny grew stronger. His muscles remembered how to work, and soon he was walking the corridors of the luminous dawn, drawing stares from every Kethrian crew member he passed. They were taller than him by almost a foot, but they seemed to shrink away from his presence. To them, he was something strange and frightening, a creature from a nightmare world who had beaten death through sheer stubbornness. Commander Thalvin, the military officer in charge of the ship's small security detail, approached Danny one day in the mess hall. He was older than Valara, with deeper ridges on his forehead and a stern expression that never seemed to soften. I have heard much about you, human, Thalvin said, taking a seat across from Danny. Valara believes you may be the key to our salvation. She thinks your species can teach us how to fight. And what do you think? Danny asked. Thalvin studied him for a long moment, his pale yellow eyes revealing nothing. I think you are one being, he said finally, one small, fragile-looking creature from a species we know nothing about. The Vroxul have armies. They have weapons that can destroy cities. What can one human possibly do against such power? It was a fair question, and Danny did not have a good answer. He was a paramedic, not a soldier. He had spent his career saving lives, not taking them. But he had also spent his career running toward danger when everyone else ran away. He had pulled survivors from car wrecks and burning buildings. He had worked in disaster zones where death lurked around every corner. Danny looked at Thalvin and saw the same hopelessness he had seen in Valara's eyes. These people had no idea how to face the threat that was coming for them. "Back on Earth," Danny said slowly, "I was a paramedic. Do you know what that means?" Thalvan shook his head. "It means I was trained to run into the worst situations imaginable and find a way to help. Fires, floods, earthquakes, violent criminals. It did not matter what the danger was. My job was to face it and save whoever I could." He leaned forward, holding the commander's gaze. "Humans are not strong because we are bigger or faster than other creatures. We are strong because we refuse to give up. We adapt. We survive. We find a way when there is no way. That stubbornness is in our blood, and it has carried us through millions of years of challenges that should have killed us." Thalvan was silent for a long moment. "Fine words," he said at last. "But words will not stop the Vroxul." "No," Danny agreed, "but I might." The commander stared at him in disbelief. "You would fight for us? A species you only met weeks ago? You would risk your life for people who are not your own?" Danny thought about Velara crying over his body, believing she had failed to save him. He thought about the kindness the Kethrin had shown him. He thought about the debt he owed. "You saved my life," he said simply. "Where I come from, that means something. You gave me a second chance when the universe tried to take everything from me. How could I not fight for you?" Thalvan rose from his seat, and for the first time, something like respect flickered in his pale eyes. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "perhaps there is more to humans than I believed." He turned and walked away, leaving Danny alone with his thoughts and the growing certainty that his second life was about to become far more dangerous than his first. The news came on a cold morning, 3 weeks after Danny had made his promise to Commander Thalvan. A distress signal from the colony world of Velcora, home to nearly 200,000 Kethrian civilians, reporting that Vroxul raiding ships had entered their system. Danny stood on the bridge of the luminous dawn and watched the chaos unfold around him. Kethrian officers rushed from station to station, their lavender faces pale with fear as they tried to coordinate an evacuation that everyone knew would fail. "How long until the raiders reach the colony?" Captain Sullivan demanded from her command chair. "6 hours at current speed," a young officer replied, his voice trembling. "Our evacuation ships can carry perhaps 10,000. The rest will be left behind." Danny felt sick as the numbers settled into his mind. 190,000 people, innocent civilians, were about to be captured or killed because there was no one to protect them. Velara appeared at his side, her iridescent eyes red from crying. "I have family on Velcora," she whispered. "My younger brother and his children. They will not make it to the evacuation ships in time." Danny felt something harden inside his chest, a cold determination that pushed aside fear and doubt. "Show me everything you have on these Vroxul," he said. "Their weapons, their tactics, their weaknesses. I need to know what I am dealing with." Velara stared at him in confusion. "What are you planning to do?" "I am going to buy you time," Danny replied. "I'm going to slow them down long enough for more people to evacuate. Get me that information, and get me whatever weapons you have." The next few hours were a blur of preparation and planning. Velara provided him with detailed files on the Vroxul, and what Danny learned both frightened and encouraged him. The Vroxul were large and powerful, standing nearly 8 feet tall with thick scales covering their bodies like natural armor. They were strong and fast, but they were also arrogant. They had conquered dozens of peaceful species and had never faced real resistance. They expected the Kethrian to run and hide. They did not expect a fight. Their weapons were powerful but slow, designed for intimidation rather than precision. Their tactics relied on overwhelming force because they had never needed to be clever. Danny saw opportunities in their weaknesses, gaps he could exploit. Commander Thalvan provided him with the only weapons the Kethrian possessed, hunting tools designed for taking down small wildlife on colony worlds. They were weak compared to human firearms, but they were better than nothing. "This is suicide," Falvin said as he watched Danny examine the equipment. "You are one being against a raiding party of at least 40 Vraxul warriors. You will be killed within minutes." "Maybe," Danny admitted, "but those are minutes your people can use to escape. Every second I can buy them is a second that saves lives." Velara found him in the shuttle bay as he prepared to depart for the colony world. Her face was wet with tears, and her hands shook as she reached out to touch his arm. "Please do not do this," she begged. "I cannot watch you die again. I cannot bear to see the light leave your eyes a second time." Danny took her hands in his, marveling at how delicate they felt against his calloused palms. "You brought me back from death," he said softly. "You gave me a chance I never should have had. Let me use that chance to protect the people who saved me." "But why?" Velara demanded. "Why would you throw away the life we fought so hard to preserve?" Danny smiled, and it was a sad smile, filled with all the complicated emotions he did not have words to express. "Because that is what humans do," he said. "We fight for the people we care about. We stand between the innocent and those who would hurt them. It is not logical, and it is not safe, but it is who we are." He released her hands and turned toward the shuttle. "If I survive, I will tell you stories about Earth that will make your hair stand on end. If I do not, then at least I died for something that mattered." Velara watched him climb into the shuttle, her heart breaking with every step he took. "Daniel!" she called out just before the door closed. He turned back to look at her. "Come back to me," she whispered. "Please come back." Danny nodded once, and then the door sealed shut between them. The shuttle ride to Velcora was the longest hour of Danny's life. He spent it reviewing maps of the colony, identifying choke points and defensive positions, planning 100 different strategies and discarding most of them. He was outnumbered and outgunned. There was no scenario where he could defeat the Vraxul in open combat. His only chance was to be smarter than them, to use the terrain against them, to make them pay for every inch of ground. When the shuttle touched down on the outskirts of the main settlement, Danny could already see the Vraxul ships descending through the atmosphere like metal vultures. They were huge and ugly, bristling with weapons, designed to inspire terror in those who saw them. Danny felt the fear, but he did not let it stop him. Fear was an old friend, a companion from countless emergencies where hesitation meant death. He grabbed his equipment and ran toward the colony, his mind already calculating angles and distances. The evacuation was in chaos. Kethrian civilians crowded the streets, pushing toward the spaceport where the last transport ships were loading. Parents carried children. The elderly struggled to keep up. Everywhere Danny looked, he saw panic and despair. He found a Kethrian security officer trying to maintain order and grabbed him by the shoulder. "Listen to me," Danny said urgently. "The Vraxul will land on the eastern approach. That gives you maybe 30 minutes before they reach the city center. Focus all evacuation efforts on the western spaceport. I will slow them down." The officer stared at him in shock. "You are the human, but how can you possibly stop them?" "I cannot stop them," Danny admitted. "But I can make them wish they had never come to this world. Now, go. Every second counts." The officer hesitated for only a moment before nodding and rushing off to relay Danny's instructions. Danny turned toward the east, toward the approaching enemy, and began to run. He had supplies to gather and traps to set, and the clock was ticking. As he worked, he thought about his life before the accident, about the endless cycles of emergency calls and hospital visits. He had saved hundreds of lives over the years, pulling people back from the brink of death through skill and determination. But this was different. This was not about healing. This was about destruction, about causing enough damage to buy innocent people time to escape. Could he become something violent and dangerous when his entire career had been built on preserving life? Danny looked up at the descending Vroxul ships and felt the answer settle into his bones. For the Catherine, for Velara, for the brother and nieces he had never met who were counting on someone to protect them, he could become whatever he needed to be. The first Vroxul warriors touched down just as the sun began to set, their massive forms silhouetted against the burning orange sky. Danny watched from his hiding spot and felt his heart pounding in his chest. It was time to show these conquerors what a single human could do. The Vroxul moved through the empty streets of Velcora with the confidence of predators who had never known fear. There were 42 of them, each standing nearly 8 feet tall, with thick green scales that gleamed in the fading sunlight. They carried plasma rifles that could burn through steel, and they laughed among themselves as they advanced toward the city center. They expected no resistance. The Kethrian always ran, always hid, always surrendered without a fight. This raid would be like every other, easy pickings for warriors who had grown bored with victory. The first trap caught them completely by surprise. Danny had spent his precious time well, rigging explosive charges from emergency flares and mining equipment he had found in a construction site. When the lead Vroxul stepped on the hidden trigger, the blast sent him flying backward into 3 of his companions. The warriors scattered, their laughter dying instantly as they realized something was very wrong. "What was that?" the squad leader roared, scanning the empty buildings with narrowed eyes. "There is no one here to fight us." Danny answered by shooting him in the shoulder from a window 3 stories up. The hunting rifle he carried was weak by Vroxul standards, barely enough to pierce their thick scales. But a shot to the joint where the arm met the body found softer flesh. The squad leader howled in pain and dropped his weapon. "There!" one of the warriors shouted, pointing at Danny's position. One of them stayed behind. Plasma bolts slammed into the building, turning stone and metal into molten slag. But Danny was already moving. He had planned his escape route carefully, ducking through a pre-cut hole in the floor and dropping to the level below, just as the room he had occupied exploded. He ran through the building and out the back, circling around to a new position, while the Vroxul wasted ammunition, destroying the structure he had already abandoned. This was how he would fight them, not through strength or superior firepower, but through speed and cunning, and an intimate knowledge of human guerrilla tactics that Earth's bloody history had perfected over thousands of years. The Vroxul split into smaller groups, each one hunting for the single defender who had dared to challenge them. Danny picked them off one by one, leading them into traps and ambushes, never staying in one place long enough for them to catch him. He collapsed the building onto a group of 5, burying them under tons of rubble. He lured another group into a chemical storage facility and ignited the volatile compounds inside. He set up tripwires and falling debris and a dozen other hazards that the arrogant warriors never thought to watch for. Each victory cost him. A plasma bolt grazed his leg, leaving a burn that screamed with every step. Another shot caught his shoulder, spinning him around and sending his rifle clattering to the ground. A Vroxul warrior got close enough to slash him across the chest with claws like knives, leaving 4 parallel cuts that bled freely. But Danny kept fighting, kept moving, kept hurting them in every way he could. The sun set, and darkness fell over Velcora. And in the darkness, Danny had even more advantages. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters on the African plains, running down prey through endurance and tracking. The night held no terror for him, the way it did for species who had never known predators. The Vroxul grew afraid. They had come expecting easy prey, and instead they found a nightmare. This single creature, this tiny being from an unknown species, had already killed or wounded nearly half their force. How was this possible? "Fall back," the new squad leader ordered, his voice trembling with something that might have been fear. Regroup at the landing zone. We need to call for reinforcements. But Danny was not finished with them. He ambushed the retreating warriors at a bridge they needed to cross, dropping the span into the river below and forcing them to find another route. When they tried to go around, he was waiting with more traps, more attacks, more relentless pressure. A Vraxol warrior finally cornered him in an alley, towering over Danny with murder in his yellow eyes. "You will die for what you have done," the warrior snarled, raising his plasma rifle. Danny threw a handful of dirt into the warrior's face and lunged forward while he was blinded. He jammed his knife into the gap between scales on the warrior's neck, the only vulnerable spot he had identified during hours of studying Valara's files. The Vraxol collapsed, and Danny pulled his knife free with a wet sound that would haunt his dreams for years to come. He was exhausted, bleeding from a dozen wounds, running on nothing but adrenaline and the stubborn refusal to give up. Every breath hurt, and his vision was starting to blur around the edges. But when he looked back toward the western spaceport, he saw the last evacuation transport lifting into the sky, its engines glowing like a beacon of hope in the darkness. They had made it. The civilians had escaped because he had bought them enough time. The remaining Vraxol, perhaps 15 or 16 still able to fight, had gathered at their landing zone. They were calling for reinforcements, demanding that their commanders send more troops to deal with this impossible enemy. Danny dragged himself to a position overlooking their camp and watched them through blood-stained eyes. He should run. He should find a place to hide and wait for rescue. He had done enough, had succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. But something burned in his chest, a fire that refused to die. These creatures had come to enslave and murder innocent people, and they would do it again on the next world and the next, until someone stopped them. Danny loaded his last few rounds into his rifle and started moving toward their position. The Vraxol saw him coming, a lone figure stumbling through the darkness, covered in blood, both his own and theirs. They raised their weapons, ready to finally end this nightmare. But instead of charging at them, Danny stopped just within shouting distance and raised his voice so they could all hear. "Listen to me, you overgrown lizards," he called out, his voice hoarse but steady. "My name is Daniel Cole, and I am a human from a planet called Earth. Tonight you have learned what one human can do. Imagine what billions of us could do if you threatened those we have chosen to protect." The Vraxol stared at him, in silence. "Go back to your masters," Danny continued. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them about the species that refuses to die. Tell them that if they ever attack the Kethrine again, humanity will come for them, and we will not stop until every last one of you pays for your crimes." He lowered his rifle and stood there, swaying on his feet, but unbowed. That is not a threat. It is a promise. For a long, terrible moment, Danny thought they would shoot him anyway. Then, slowly, the Vraxol began to withdraw to their ships. One by one, the vessels lifted off and climbed toward the stars, leaving Velcora behind. Danny watched them go, and only when the last ship vanished from sight did he allow himself to collapse. He lay on the cold ground, staring up at the unfamiliar stars, and wondered if this was finally the end. He had used up everything he had, and his body was broken almost beyond repair. But as consciousness faded, he heard the sound of engines approaching, heard familiar voices shouting his name. The Kethrine had come back for him. Valara's face appeared above him, her iridescent eyes filled with tears, just like the first time he had woken to see her. "You impossible, stubborn, wonderful human," she whispered. "I told you to come back to me." Danny smiled weakly as darkness claimed him. "I always keep my promises," he managed to say before everything went black. Daniel Cole woke up in a medical bay for the second time in his strange new life, and for the second time, Valara was there waiting for him. But this time, instead of tears of grief, her iridescent eyes sparkled with joy and relief. You have been unconscious for 12 days, she said softly, taking his hand in hers. We were not certain you would wake up again. Your injuries were severe, and you had lost so much blood that your heart stopped twice during surgery. Danny tried to laugh, but it came out as more of a wheeze. Apparently I am really bad at staying dead, he managed to say. Velara smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing Danny had ever seen. The Kethrian Medical Council has classified humans as officially impossible, she told him. They do not understand how your species survives the things you survive. They have decided to simply accept it as a mystery of the universe. Danny squeezed her hand gently, mindful of how fragile her bones were compared to his. What happened after I passed out? Did the Vraxul really leave? They did more than leave, Velara replied, her expression growing serious. They sent a message to their commanders describing what happened on Velcora. The message was intercepted by our listening stations, and it has spread across Kethrian space. She paused, and something like wonder filled her eyes. They called you a demon, Daniel. They said you appeared from nowhere and cut through their warriors like a force of nature. They claimed you could not be killed, that you kept fighting no matter how many times they wounded you. The Vraxul High Command has issued orders to avoid any system where humans might be present. He had hoped his final words to the retreating warriors would have some effect, but he had not dared to believe they would work so well. And the people of Velcora? Velara's brother and his family? Safe, Velara said, and tears of happiness rolled down her lavender cheeks. Everyone made it to the evacuation ships because of the time you bought them. My brother cannot stop talking about the strange human who saved his children. The door to the medical bay opened, and Commander Thalven entered with two other Kethrin that Danny did not recognize. One was elderly, with deep wrinkles and pale silver eyes that seemed to see through everything. The other was younger, dressed in elaborate robes that suggested high status. Thalven's stern face had softened considerably since their last conversation. Human, he said formally, then corrected himself. Daniel Cole, I owe you an apology. I doubted you. I thought you were throwing your life away on a fool's mission. I was wrong, and I am honored to admit it. Danny nodded weakly. You were right to doubt. I had no business surviving that fight. Luck played as much a part as skill. Perhaps, the elderly Kethrin said, stepping forward, but courage is not diminished by fortunate circumstances. I am High Elder Siral, leader of the Kethrin Governing Council. I have come to thank you personally for what you have done for our people. Danny tried to sit up straighter, but his injured body refused to cooperate. Velara gently pressed him back down. What I did was repay a debt, Danny said. Your people saved my life. I could not stand by and watch them suffer. High Elder Siral studied him with those ancient silver eyes. The Kethrin have traveled the stars for 10,000 years, she said slowly. In all that time, we have never encountered a species quite like yours. You are small and fragile by galactic standards. Yet you fight with a ferocity that terrifies warriors twice your size. You should have died a dozen times on Velcora. Yet here you lie, already healing from wounds that would have killed any of us. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. You have given us something precious, Daniel Cole. You have given us hope. For the first time since the Vraxul appeared in our space, my people believe that survival is possible. The younger Kethrin stepped forward. I am Ambassador Velran, he said. The Council has voted to establish formal contact with your species. We have used the communication frequencies we found in the wreckage of your ship to send a message to Earth. Humans know about the Kethrin now, and they know about you. Danny's heart nearly stopped. You contacted Earth? They know I am alive? They know everything, Velran confirmed. We sent them a complete record of your actions on Velcora, along with an invitation to establish diplomatic relations. The response arrived this morning. He produced a small device and activated it. A holographic image appeared above Danny's bed, showing a human woman in a formal uniform. "This is Admiral Patricia Hayes of the United Earth Space Command," the woman said, her voice crisp and professional. "We have received your message and are preparing a diplomatic mission to travel to Catherine space. We will arrive within 6 standard months." Her expression softened slightly. "To Daniel Cole, if you are hearing this, your family has been notified of your survival. Your sister Lisa asked me to tell you that she always knew you were too stubborn to die. Earth is proud of you, son. You have shown the galaxy what humanity stands for. Come home safe." The recording ended, and Danny found himself blinking back tears. Lisa knew he was alive. Humanity knew what had happened. Help was coming. "The universe has changed because of you," High Elder Cyril said quietly. "The Catherine will no longer face the darkness alone. We have found allies, true allies who will stand beside us in our time of need." Danny looked at the faces surrounding his bed, at Velara holding his hand, at Commander Thalvin who had learned to respect him, at the High Elder who spoke of hope and alliance. "I never wanted to be a hero," he said honestly. "I was just a paramedic from Ohio who got lost in space. Everything that happened after that was just me trying to do the right thing." Velara leaned close, her iridescent eyes meeting his. "That is exactly what makes you a hero," she whispered. "You did not seek glory or recognition. You simply saw people in need and ran toward the danger instead of away from it. That is the rarest quality in the entire galaxy." In the months that followed, Danny's wounds healed, though he would carry scars for the rest of his life. He remained aboard the luminous Dawn as the Catherine prepared for humanity's arrival, teaching them about Earth's history and culture while learning everything he could about the wider galaxy. When the first human diplomatic vessels finally appeared in Catherine space, Danny stood on the observation deck of the luminous Dawn and watched them approach. Beside him stood Velara, who had been appointed as the Catherine liaison to humanity. "Are you nervous?" she asked. Danny considered the question carefully. "A little," he admitted. 6 months ago, I was floating dead in space, and now I am about to witness the beginning of an alliance between 2 species. It is a lot to process." Velara took his hand, no longer afraid of his strength the way she had been when they first met. "Whatever comes next," she said, "we will face it together, the Kethrian and the humans, standing side by side against whatever challenges the universe throws at us." Danny squeezed her hand and smiled. He thought about the moment he had accepted death in the cold void of space. He thought about opening his eyes to see an alien woman weeping over him. He thought about everything that had happened since that impossible second chance. His life had not ended among the wreckage of the Orion's grace. It had transformed into something greater than he ever could have imagined. And as the human ships drew closer, carrying the promise of a new future for 2 species, Daniel Cole knew that the best was yet to come.